In February 1980, inside the new Mexico State Penitentiary, chaos erupted. Inmates overpowered guards, seized control of the prison, and unleashed one of the most violent uprisings in American history. For 36 terrifying hours, prisoners tortured rivals, set fires, and held guard hostage while state troopers surrounded the compound. When it was finally over, 33 men were dead, and America had witnessed a nightmare that changed how prisons were run forever. It was still dark outside when the first screams echoed through the cell blocks. The metal doors of Dorm E-2 shook violently as inmates slammed them open using a stolen sledgehammer. Guards who had been patrolling minutes earlier now ran for their lives. Flames from burning mattresses lit the corridor in an orange glow. The smell of smoke, sweat, and blood filled the air. Men shouted over each other, some begging for mercy, others calling for revenge. This was not a fight anymore. It was a massacre in motion. Then came the roar of the crowd as the prisoners reached the main control center. The steel door, once thought unbreakable, snapped open with a thunderous crash. What happened next would mark one of the darkest nights in American prison history. The scene freezes here, as if time stopped. How did it all get this far? In the days leading up to that horrific morning, tension inside the prison had been building like a ticking bomb. The inmates were crammed into overcrowded dorms, some built for 40 men now holding more than 100. Basic supplies were short. Food was terrible. And everyone knew the system was breaking. The prison had quietly ended rehabilitation programs months before. Hope had vanished. Violence became currency. Gangs ruled the dorms while understaffed guards turned a blind eye. Contraband, alcohol, homemade knives, even drugs circulated freely. A rumor started that certain inmates were about to be moved into solitary confinement, snitches and informants among them. For the prison gangs, that meant one thing: payback time. By Friday night, February 1st, 1980, the prison was ready to explode. 2 guards were posted at the main control station. At 1:40 a.m., a group of inmates asked for a late-night cleaning duty, something they'd done before. The guards buzzed the door open. That single mistake opened the gates of hell. In seconds, inmates tackled the officers, beat them unconscious, and stole their keys. Others ran through the cell blocks, freeing friends and rival gangs alike. The chaos spread faster than anyone could react. The prison's central corridor, known as the Main, became a war zone. Inmates armed with pipes, shanks, and fire extinguishers stormed through one housing unit after another. Fires broke out everywhere. Those accused of being informants were hunted down. Some were trapped inside locked cells and burned alive. Others were dragged into open dorms where mobs delivered brutal street justice. Outside the walls, troopers surrounded the facility, but no one dared to enter. Inside, it was 36 hours of pure chaos. And amid the screaming and blood, one sound cut through everything. The faint crackle of a radio still working inside the control booth. A surviving guard whispered into it, voice shaking. "They've taken the whole place. God help us." That transmission would be the first confirmation the outside world received of the nightmare inside Santa Fe. For the first few hours, the outside world had no idea what was happening inside the New Mexico State Penitentiary. The phone lines were dead, and the control room was silent except for static. By the time sunrise broke over Santa Fe, black smoke billowed from the rooftops. State police surrounded the compound, but even from a distance, the screams could still be heard. Inside, chaos ruled. Every gang had carved out its own territory. What started as a revolt against the guards had now turned into a brutal civil war among prisoners themselves. The air was thick with smoke and terror. The inmates had full control of the prison's keys, gates, and intercom system. They moved from block to block, searching for enemies. Some hunted down rival gang members. Others went after informants, men who had testified in previous disciplinary hearings. They dragged them into the open, beat them, and left them for dead. Those who weren't part of the violence hid in fear. Dozens of inmates locked themselves inside cells, praying not to be found. By mid-morning, flames tore through Dorm E1. Smoke filled the air vents. The smell of burning plastic and human flesh was unbearable. From a windowless cell in the segregation wing, A group of guards sat huddled, hostages now. They could hear the chaos outside, but couldn't see it. The riot had turned into something far worse than anyone imagined, a horror movie unfolding in real life. Meanwhile, on the outside, State Police Commander Joe Black arrived at the scene. He immediately saw the scale of the disaster. Dozens of vehicles from the National Guard and FBI lined the perimeter, but no one dared enter. The inmates had taken up weapons, including sawed-off pipes, blades, and tools from a maintenance shop. Negotiators tried to make contact using loudspeakers, but the only response was laughter and the sound of gunshots echoing from within. Inside, a new horror began. Inmates who had once been rivals formed temporary alliances to hunt down informants kept in protective custody unit. When they broke into that section, it became a slaughterhouse. Walls were smeared with makeshift graffiti. Justice for snitches. The violence was beyond anything even hardened prisoners had seen. Hours turned into days. The riot dragged on into its second night. Exhausted inmates staggered through the halls, some collapsing near the fires they had set. Bodies lay everywhere, some burned beyond recognition. A few prisoners began pleading over the intercom for medical help. Others tried to surrender, waving white shirts through broken windows. But from the outside, no one moved in. The fear of ambush was too high. By the second morning, troopers and tactical teams finally prepared to breach the compound. They fired tear gas through the windows, moved incautiously, and found scenes of unimaginable horror. Charred remains, destroyed cell blocks, and handwritten notes from inmates begging for mercy. The riot was over, but the damage was irreversible. 33 inmates dead, over 200 injured. Not a single guard killed, but every one of them scarred for life. In the end, the official investigation revealed that negligence, overcrowding, and lack of rehabilitation were the real killers at night. The riot forced nationwide prison reforms, but the memories of what happened inside those walls would never fade. As one investigator later said, "It wasn't a riot, it was hell itself." The riot finally burned itself out sometime before dawn on the third day. Troopers in gas masks crept through the blackened ruins, stepping over pools of ash that used to be mattresses. In one of the dorms, a sergeant found a radio still hissing static beside a melted desk phone. All units were secure, he said, though no one inside felt secure again. Outside the gates, reporters, families, and state officials waited in stunned silence as the casualty numbers trickled out. 33 men dead, more than 200 injured. The news shocked the nation. America had never seen a prison riot this savage. Bodies were carried out wrapped in blankets. Inside, medics treated survivors, both inmates and guards, with the same trembling hands. Some prisoners sobbed, others stared blankly, their minds trapped somewhere between guilt and disbelief. Investigators from the FBI and the State Attorney General's office moved in immediately. What they found was chaos frozen in time. Melted locks, smashed typewriters, blood-stained floor plans, and graffiti describing revenge. Governor Bruce King demanded answers. He toured the wreckage wearing a surgical mask, the stench still clinging to the air. His aides whispered that the system had failed long before the riot began. Too many inmates, too few guards, no hope. News cameras captured everything. Across America, people asked how such brutality could happen in a modern prison. In the weeks that followed, survivors told investigators their stories. One inmate described hiding under a bunk for 10 hours while fires raged around him. Another admitted he had joined the violence just to stay alive. Guards confessed they'd been terrified, not only during the riot, but long before it, working understaffed shifts and ignoring warning signs. The testimonies painted a picture of a pressure cooker waiting to explode. Public outrage forced action. The Department of Corrections began overhauling facilities statewide. New locks, better communication systems, emergency response plans, and mental health programs. Rehabilitation, once ignored, returned to policy discussions. Prisons across the country studied the Santa Fe blueprint, realizing that overcrowding and neglect were recipes for disaster. Yet for many who lived through it, reform could never erase the memories. Guards suffered nightmares. Inmates carried scars and guilt. A few never spoke of it again. Years later, when journalists asked one former hostage how he survived, he simply said, "I stopped being human for 36 hours. By the mid-1990s, the old New Mexico State Penitentiary had been replaced by new facilities, but its shadow still loomed. Visitors driving past the empty compound sometimes swore they could feel something heavy in the air, a reminder of what happens when despair and violence are left to grow unchecked. In the end, the riot changed more than one prison. It changed the way America looked at justice itself. Control without compassion had failed. Neglect had birthed chaos. And in those 36 hours of hell, the nation learned that even behind bars, humanity can't be caged forever.